feels like it's harder than ever to find a job. As a freelancer myself, I know the struggle. But a new hiring trend has begun, and it's going to see some winners and some losers, because some of the largest companies in the world have quietly quit their diversity targets. Here we'll examine which companies are doing it, why they are, and what this means for you. Before we begin, if you appreciate our journalism, please do press the subscribe button and leave your comments below. Now back to the story. In recent years, many companies have used practices to ensure their workforce is diverse, with people from different racial, gender, sexual, and disability backgrounds. These efforts have included giving additional consideration to applicants from minority groups, conducting diversity and inclusion training sessions, and doing business with suppliers that have a diverse leadership. These practices are often referred to as diversity, equality and inclusion, affirmative action, or positive discrimination, but they have sparked significant debate. And in January 2025, Facebook's parent company Meta revealed that they're doing away with all of them. And Meta are just the latest company to follow what is becoming a trend. Amazon recently sent an email to all employees about the company's representation and inclusion policies. The memo alludes to winding down outdated programs to be replaced with something else, though it doesn't say what. McDonald's sent a similar email to all its employees and suppliers. Walmart is the largest single employer in America and has also quietly announced similar policy changes. In a leaked email seen by Bloomberg, the company revealed that it was dropping its existing pro-inclusion programs, and similar efforts are taking place at several major brands, including Ford, Boeing, Black & Decker, Harley-Davidson, and Microsoft. So it appears that some of the biggest brand names in the world are moving away from diversity targeting initiatives. So let's take a look at what exactly is changing. In Meta's letter to all employees, they announced they would stop using a practice known as the diverse slate. A diverse slate is when an employer deliberately curates a shortlist populated with candidates from a range of protected categories, including race, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and educational background. In theory, the practice means that people who might be vulnerable to prejudice can raise their chances of getting jobs. But it does mean that if the two strongest candidates are white, straight, able-bodied men, then one of those will probably miss out on the shortlist in favour of a diverse candidate. Meta also announced that they were removing the diversity targets in the companies they do business with. Up to now, the firm had prioritised working with suppliers owned by people from diverse backgrounds. This is a fairly common policy, also shared by the likes of McDonald's and Walmart. But all these companies now have ditched that policy. In practice, that means if there are two stationery suppliers, one owned by a white couple and one owned by a black couple, Facebook will probably do business with the one that will give them the best deal, regardless of the ethnicity of the owners. Another area facing cuts is equity and inclusion training programs. These initiatives are intended to foster understanding and inclusivity, but they have been controversial. Critics argue that such training can make certain groups, specifically white men, feel uncomfortable or even targeted. So now we know what exactly is changing. We need to understand why it's happening at all. Well, it's certainly true that the political landscape has been changing, with a rise in votes for socially conservative governments, most significantly Donald Trump, who has himself spoken against affirmative action. Business leaders have been publicly cozying up to Trump. Notably, the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, wouldn't endorse a candidate in the run-up to the election, breaking decades of precedent. But a changing political mood only explains part of the story, because this rollback began in 2023, when something monumental happened. The Supreme Court is the highest authority in the United States, and in 2023 they heard two cases: Students for Fair Admissions Incorporated versus President and Fellows of Harvard College, and Students for Fair Admissions Incorporated versus the University of North Carolina. The SFFA claimed that both universities' affirmative action policies were unconstitutional because they disadvantaged white and Asian applicants. Now, this actually wasn't the first case of its kind, but it was the Supreme Court itself that ruled in 1978 that affirmative action was constitutional, but this time upholding the SFFA's claim that affirmative action violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. It is now illegal for universities and colleges to grant extra points to applicants based on their race. But what does this have to do with employment? Well, businesses are still free to consider race when considering an applicant, but it seems some corporations think the writing's on the wall. The Supreme Court has now set a precedent, and legal challenges to affirmative action that would once have been defeated may now be upheld. But there is another reason why this might all be happening now. In 2020, $7 billion was spent on DEI hiring initiatives worldwide. In 2026, that's expected to double to $15 billion. These are figures by McKinsey & Company, one of the world-leading management consultancy firms. So the companies we've mentioned do stand to save a fair bit of money, and a change in the political wind is a tidy excuse to make these controversial changes now. I should mention that McKinsey has written several reports suggesting a diverse workforce yields greater profits, but apparently this is a risk that these companies are willing to take. So now we understand what's happening, who's doing it, and why. What does this actually mean for you when looking for your next job? Well, importantly, this isn't just happening in the United States. The biggest companies like McDonald's and Meta even employ people all over the world. In the UK, local government has come under fire for spending on diversity. But it's important to remember that this change isn't happening across all companies. One big one that's not made changes is Apple, but its shareholders will vote on this very thing in February. But say you're applying for a role at a company that has abolished DEI targets. Well, statistically, a white, straight, able-bodied man is now more likely to get that job over anybody else. But no companies have said that they will start deliberately discriminating against minorities. In fact, it will still be illegal to do so. What it does mean is that it'll be the luck of the draw if the person considering your application has any prejudices.